Hello, I'm Bud McCord. I'm here in Brazil, South America. Welcome to Food for Thought, Thinking with Jesus. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And I firmly believe that we can not just think about Jesus, but we can actually think with the mind of Christ, come to the right conclusions, be able to separate the things that are permanent and the things that are temporary, and move through our lives delivering God's love one day at a time. We try to get our thoughts together as a group for a few minutes by reading a devotional. And the devotional for today, October the 14th, 2020, is called Seeing the Invisible. Seeing the Invisible. That little title almost seems a little bit ridiculous. Seeing the invisible. But in the spiritual life, in the life of a disciple, we absolutely must develop the skill of being able to see what is permanent, what's behind the visible, what's before the visible, what is eternal and what is temporary. And I didn't just think this up. It comes directly from the teaching of Jesus and from the teachings of the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18. The Apostle Paul, who was a man who was persecuted, was martyred, one of the most influential writers of the scriptures, many of the books of the New Testament, he developed the ability to see the invisible, to see the original, so that he could deal with the tremendous persecution he suffered and even the death that he died. So I think he's one of those voices we would be very wise to take seriously. So let's look at this statement that he makes about how he navigated his world and his difficulty as a believer. He said this: "So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." And here's the devotional for today. Important and eternal things are always happening in the invisible and spiritual world. We may not perceive these things because we are focused only on the visible world. Every disciple has the Spirit of Christ living in union with his Spirit. Because of this connection, disciples can see the spiritual world if they will focus on Christ. Spiritual disciplines such as seeing, listening, thanking, worshiping are tools that disciples can use to perfect their spiritual vision. At this moment, the world, according to the scriptures, lies in the evil one. It is because of this that the world is full of distractions and noise. Our enemy knows that disciples focused on visible things are distracted people. The rule in the spiritual life is that which gets your attention gets you. Disciples who develop the ability to see God acting in their circumstances and daily events don't leave the world. They overcome the world by faith. They have the power to overcome because by faith they can see clearly the eternal and important. The disciple who can clearly see with spiritual vision what God is doing will go with him in the direction of the pain of this world. To see what God is doing inspires the believer to deliver love. Ask God to open your spiritual eyes. Besides the visible things we all see, there are beautiful, permanent, and perfect things happening around you moment by moment. Give God your full attention. You will be amazed when you see how active God is in our world. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. There is a statement in 1 John about this invisible relationship that we have, that we can see the invisible, permanent reality. And then from that, we're able to manifest in our reality the beauty of that invisible reality. As 1 John chapter 4, verse 12 says, "No one has seen God at any time. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love has been perfected in us." This small statement, no one has seen God at any time. It's interesting because Jesus said, "If you have seen me, you have seen the Father." So is that a contradiction? No, it's really a revelation. The invisible realities that govern all reality are before the visible. There is this progression from that which we do not see to that which we see. And when we start out understanding the spiritual, we understand that God is. God is, whether we see him or we do not see him, whether he comes to us in physical form or he doesn't, God is. And so God does not declare that he is because we see him. He declares that he is because he is. That's why in the Old Testament he's called the I am. I am. Whether I see him or not, he is. Let's use a little illustration from our real world here today, for instance. The pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, we didn't see it coming because we couldn't see it. You and I, as perhaps the victims of COVID, will never see it. But that doesn't mean that we don't believe it exists now because we see the effect. So when there's a cause that we identify as being a real permanent cause, then we can understand the effect. We can deal with the effect, but we have to get to where we understand the cause. In the spiritual life, we have been gifted with the benefit of having the invisible cause revealed to us in the person of Jesus. In John chapter 1, it talks about that the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and everything that was created by the Word. And the Word is invisible. A spoken word is invisible. And so when God creates in the Old Testament, even his word is invisible, but the effects of that word are visible. They came into being, and we see the creation around us. So a believer in Jesus is one who develops the ability, because Christ has come and we now have the Spirit of Christ, of being able to go back into the invisible to understand the things that are permanent, so that we're not just simply reacting to the temporary. And herein lies the advantage of the Christian life. We can be rooted in that which is not seen, that which is permanent, that which is governing the very existence of everything that is seen. And so we become less and less a victim or a prisoner of the effects, but rather we live from the source. For we look not at the things which are seen. Why is it necessary to not focus on the things that are seen? They are the effects. They are not the cause. They are the effects. They are not the solution. So for the believer, we must look at Jesus, because he is the revelation. He who sees me sees the Father. He is the revelation of all the permanent things. And he is not involved with the temporary things. And he calls us away from the temporary things and calls us to be rooted in the permanent things. The Apostle Paul said this about his walk with Christ. He said, if Christ is not risen, then my faith is in vain. Meaning what? If Jesus is still in the grave, then I'm still under the control of the temporary things. But if he is risen, then even my suffering and even my martyrdom fits, because my martyrdom is temporary and my suffering is temporary. So I'm not going to look at that to define myself. I'm going to look at the permanent to define myself. Every Christian needs to develop a view of the permanent things as revealed in Jesus, as they live in a world filled with the effects of temporary things. And then they need to navigate between the permanent and the temporary. We as believers are not to walk in this world as people who are concerned with temporary effects or responses, but rather we have the view of the things that are invisible, because we can see Jesus, and in seeing Jesus, we can see what is permanent. One of the things that's permanent is forgiveness. Another thing that is perfect is love. Another thing that is perfect is generosity. It's the fruit of the Spirit. These are the permanent things. And we would do well to see them, and align with those permanent things and never align with the temporary things. The temporary things are what they are, temporary, and they should be given temporary attention, but the permanent things should be given permanent attention. God bless you. Think on these things with Jesus.